Modise, you could, in the interim, deal with issues of
recording in progress.
Etiquette. Hello, Modise.
Thank you, Mr. Kurasha.
Sure.
I was having some technical issues here, but I think they are sorted now. Apologies about that. Good morning, honorable members, and good morning to the Secretary General of the SADC-PF. In terms of our broadcast requirements for today, can I request all honorable members that are on the platform to please switch on their videos so that we can be able to determine if they are ready for our live broadcast. Can I request honorable members on the platform to please switch on their cameras?
adoption of our agenda. Any member, please? Who second the adoption of the agenda, please?
Honorable Matebula, would you like to second the agenda?
I
You are mute.
second. I second.
Honorable Chair, Honorable Matebula from Eswatini is seconded.
Muito obrigado.
Thank you very much. So our agenda for today is adopted.
Assim,
As such,
o projeto de agenda foi
as our agenda has been adopted,
essa ordem de trabalho.
let's look at our program.
Vou aqui apresentar a locução boas-vindas.
And I'll start with my opening speech now.
Prezados membros da Comissão
Honorable members of the SADC-PF Standing Committee on Democratization, Governance and Human Rights, the Secretary General of the SADC Parliamentary Forum, Mrs. Boemo Goma, Committee Secretary, Mr. Russia, and other staff from SADC PF Secretary and National Parliaments, our distinguished resource persons, Honorable Justice Wagile Dingake, former judge of the High Court and Industrial Court in Botswana, Residual Special Court for Sierra Leone, and the Supreme and National Courts of Papua New Guinea, Mr. Jorge Cardozo, Director, SADC Organ on Politics, Defense and Security Affairs, His Excellency Ambassador Said Jinit, Special Advisor, African Center for the Constructive Resolution of Disputes, and representatives of partner organizations, representative of media organizations. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my singular honor and privilege to welcome you to this statutory meeting of the SADC-PF Standing Committee on Democratization, Governance and Human Rights, which is being held under the theme Peace, Security and Conflict Trends in the SADC region, strengthening Parliament's role in conflict prevention and management. The meeting accords the committee yet another opportunity to deliberate on various thematic issues of regional interest and concern in line with its mandate as stipulated in Rule of Procedure 42D of the SADC-PF Rules of Procedure, and report to the plenary assembly accordingly. Honorable members and distinguished participants, the theme for our meeting is very relevant and timely. Southern Africa remains a peaceful and politically stable region, courtesy of the great strides made by SADC towards ensuring state and human security and conflict prevention and management within the territories of member states. Indeed, SADC has developed various regional frameworks and created several institutions to entrench cooperation and mutual trust in peace and security. We are all cognizant of the critical role of peace and security towards socio-economic development of the SADC region. Indeed, unless a peaceful and stable political and security environment prevails, SADC and its member states would be unable to realize the objectives of regional socio-economic development, poverty eradication, and regional integration, which are exposed within the Regional Development Blueprint, namely the Regional Indicative Strategic Development Plan. I therefore wish to commend SADC for developing a harmonized strategic indicative plan for the organ on defense, politics and security as the region's cardinal implementation framework for the SADC protocol on politics, defense and security cooperation of 1999 and the SADC Mutual Defense Pact of 2003, among other instruments on peace and security. I am aware that the DGHR Standing Committee was extensively consulted during the review of SIPO in 2012, thereby according parliamentarians of the region the opportunity to bring citizens closer to the issues of regional peace and security. I wish to reiterate the commitment by the Standing Committee back then to stand ready to collaborate with other SADC institutions, such as the Interstate Politics and Diplomacy Committee, the SADC Electoral Advisory Council, the SADC Standby Brigade, the Mediation Reference Group, the Panel of the Elders, and other stakeholders to ensure a peaceful and politically stable region. Honorable members and distinguished participants, despite the achievements on the peace and security front, the SADC region still faces several related challenges, including isolated armed conflicts, armed insurgency, acute inequality, democracy and governance deficit, political crisis, rising unemployment, especially among young people, electoral violence, xenophobic violence, and stagnated socio-economic development, among others. The COVID-19 pandemic has also accentuated peace and security related challenges in the region. For instance, we have recently witnessed rising tensions, some of which have escalated into social unrest and violent conflicts. Tackling these challenges require our collective and resolute efforts. We need to ensure that we put in place effective conflict detection, prevention, and management structures in place so as to ensure early warning and early responses in our countries and communities. Honorable members and distinguished participants, I wish to reiterate that legitimate and functioning parliaments are uniquely positioned to serve as long-term conflict prevention and management mechanisms in view of various factors, including A, the change in the nature of conflicts over the last couple of decades from traditional interstate conflicts to non-traditional intra-state conflicts, and the increasing importance in the role of parliaments in international affairs and regional integration processes. Through their law-making, oversight, and representational functions, parliaments are indeed distinctively endowed with the means and ways to play a significant role in conflict prevention and management. The legislature serves as the national forum where diverse issues affecting society are debated. In addition, the constant contact between parliamentarians and the citizens they represent allows Parliament the opportunity to detect early signs of conflict and be able to facilitate appropriate responses in a timely manner. I wish to implore national parliaments to ensure that legal frameworks of their respective countries are strengthened so that they facilitate the establishment of independent public institutions that promote democracy and good governance in line with the SDG 16 on peace, justice, and strong institutions. I also wish to call on SADC-PF to continue prioritizing the capacitation of MPs for them to be able to speedily ratify and effectively monitor implementation of relevant regional and international instruments that promote conflict prevention and resolution. This role is in line with Objective 3 of the SADC-PF Strategic Plan 2019-2023, which enjoins SADC-PF to facilitate capacity development and other programs of support for members and staff of parliaments to augment skills, knowledge, and competencies to face emerging challenges. Since most conflicts in communities are triggered by inequalities, injustice, poverty, and corruption, parliamentarians should strive to promote socioeconomic justice by ensuring transparency and accountability in the management of resources, in particular the extractive industry, and equitable distribution of the same. Honorable members and distinguished participants, this session is strategic as it will empower us as parliamentarians to be able to use our leadership roles inside Parliament and in communities to address the root causes of conflict as a way of preventing and managing conflicts. I have no doubt that the session enhance our collective ability as a committee to deliver on the mandate bestowed on us by the SADC-PF. Through the session, we'll be able to achieve the following objectives: provide members with an update on the state of the SADC region regarding peace, security, and conflict trends, raise the level of knowledge of members of parliament on the role of parliament in conflict prevention and management, strengthen the capacity of SADC parliamentarians to perform their role in conflict prevention and management, share experiences, and build consensus on priority areas for action to enhance the role of Parliament in conflict prevention and management. The committee will also get the opportunity to reflect on the role of parliaments in promoting and protecting constitutionalism and rule of law in the SADC region, based on the deliberation and resolutions by the 49th plenary session, when it considered and debated the GHR committee report on the same subject matter. Honorable members and distinguished participants, on behalf of the committee and on my own behalf, I wish to express my gratitude to our resource persons for accepting to grace our meeting and present on various issues. We are very grateful to the SADC Secretariat for designating the Director of SADC Organ on Politics, Defense and Security Affairs, Mr. Jorge Cardoso, to come and brief the committee on the state of peace and security in the SADC region and what role SADC-PF and national parliaments can play in conflict prevention and management. The significance of Director Cardoso's attendance to the committee session must be viewed within the context of the recent approval of the transformation of the SADC-PF into a SADC parliament by the SADC summit in Lilongwe, Malawi. There is a legitimate expectation of continued collaboration between the committee and the relevant structures of the organ in our pursuits for a peaceful and politically stable region. I also wish to thank Justice Dingek for always availing himself to interact with the committee. Members will recall that Judge Dingaki presented to us during the last session. In addition, I also express our heartfelt thanks to His Excellency Ambassador Said Jinit, the Special Advisor for Accord, for availing himself to be able to share the good work that Accord continues to do to promote peace on the African continent. Lastly, I wish to thank our partners, GIZ, for the financial support towards the hosting of this session. Honorable members and distinguished participants, allow me to end by wishing the meeting very fruitful deliberations. It is now my singular honor and privilege to declare this statutory meeting on peace, security, and conflict trends in the SADC region, strengthening Parliament's role in conflict prevention and management, officially opened. Thank you very much for your attention. Honorable members,
dear colleagues, I can see the hand of the secretary. Please do go ahead.
Chair, it was not a hand, it was a reaction following the presentation of your remarks.
Now,
Chair,
once again, there.
you may proceed, Chair.
Muito obrigada, muito obrigada.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. I also see Lesotho's hand up. Lesotho, did you ask for the floor?
Excuse me, Chair, the member is muted. Honorable Mafa, your mic is muted.
Sorry. Thank you very much. I'm just asking if there could be an interpreter because some of us are not familiar with the language which is being used by the chair. English should be probably used, because I think for some of us, we are just flexible with English.
Okay, thank you. If I may, Chair, just to advise honorable members that the meeting is in 3 languages: English, French, and Portuguese. And to access the language, your preferred language, at the bottom of your screen, there is an interpretation icon. And then while you are there, you select the language that you prefer. So there is English, French, and Portuguese. Have you found the interpretation icon, Honorable Mafa?
I don't
Below,
see it.
at the bottom of your screen?
At the bottom?
Yes. So at the bottom, there is where it says mute, stop video, participants, chat, share screen, then interpretation.
It's not reflected. I don't know what's happening. It's not seen.
ICT, do you want to assist?
I'm just alone. I have no one to assist me. I'm just alone. Anyway.
Yes, ma'am. It's just at the bottom right. So if you cannot see it, you can see the more button, like 3 dots with more.
Probably my SADC-PF team at the bottom.
Ma'am, can you hear me?
Okay, let me just interpreter.
Ricky Twisem, if you take your cursor, there's a computer.
I'm using an iPad.
Okay, so your cursor. You remote the participants. How we press that, you'll see chat, share screen, record English, interpretation. So when I borrow a crucial handsy, it was interpretation. So you press on that one, and then you just click on English.
Okay.
Or more I can click on more. When I hear more.
More. Yes, I can see.
Yes. And then how click on more?
More, you should see interpretation.
Interpretation.
Yes.
And then more interpretation, you click a language or like English.
Okay.
So you'll only hear English.
Okay.
You looking?
Yes, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, SG. They're much appreciated. Chair, I think the honorable member has been sorted. Chair, we may proceed. Chair is muted.
Thank you very much. But before we initiate the debate on the subject matters for the day, I would like to invite Mr. Ambassador to introduce himself, and Mr. Abram.
Thank you very much. Could you introduce yourself, please?
Chair, excuse me, Chair.
Excusez-moi, Madame la Présidente.
We proceed with the consideration of the minutes.
Nous poursuivons toujours l'examen
the flow will come a bit
l'ordre
later.
du jour.
Very well
Très
then.
bien. Alors là, je reprends. So I
Let us
understand you
then
now.
present the
We
minutes
are going now
of the
to
previous
consider
session.
the minutes of the last session, the last meeting.
Let us go page by page.
We're now going to consider this minute page by page.
I see Tanzania's hand. Is there a request for the floor? Honorable Sleman, are you requesting the floor? Please, do go ahead. Please, and I see a hand raised. Any intervention that you wish to make? Can we proceed?
Honorable Chair, Tanzania's hand is still up. I'm not sure if the honorable member is ready to take the floor.
That's what I was looking into, whether it is a mistakenly a hand that is up by mistake, or if in fact they are requesting the floor.
There is no response, which possibly may suggest that the member is not yet ready, and maybe we can proceed.
Let us then proceed with looking into our minutes. Can we request that same be shared on the screen?
Chair, we have come to the end of the minutes.
Tendo terminado a apresentação da nossa ata,
Having finished the presentation of our minutes, we can then make
So,
our contributions
after the
with
presentation
respect
of
to any possible amendments
this
that
report, we
anyone
would
may
like
wish
to seek
to
your
propose.
comments
I then
or your proposals or suggestions
floor
so as
to
to make
whomever
amendment
of
to
the
this
honorables
minute,
may
if
wish
you have
to
any
propose
changes to
possibly any
make.
amendments anyway. Dear colleagues,
alguma emenda?
any amendments to our minutes?
You have the floor.
I believe that silence reflects that which was the work that we did.
Do I take it that silence means consent, so that if there is no intervention,
Since
the
there are no
minutes is
amendments
therefore considered?
Quem propõe a adoção da nossa ata?
Who would like to propose the adoption of our minutes? Yes, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to then propose for the adoption of the minutes.
Muito obrigado, já foi proposto.
Thank you very much. Proposal. We have a proposal. Who supports the proposal of adoption? I see Zimbabwe's hand.
I'm seconding, Madam Chair.
Muito obrigado.
Thank you very much. The minutes of the previous meeting is thus adopted. Thank you very much. At this stage, honorables, recalling the presentation that I made of the report of our committee on the function of parliaments in the protection of constitutionalism and of the rule of law in Southern Africa, and respective difficulties. This was during the session of the 49th Plenary Assembly held on the 21st, 26th, and 27th. Sorry, the transmission appears to have frozen. During the deliberations, subsequent deliberation, this report led to intense debate on the part of the members. In particular, the proposal by the Parliamentary Forum foreseeing the development of a model law about the function of parliaments in the promotion and protection of constitutionalism and of the rule of law in the region, with a view to what has been put forth. It is therefore fundamental that the committee analyzes critically the credibility to be afforded and the inherent explanations about the development of the model law referred to within a more enlarged ambit for the protection of constitutionalism and the rule of law in the SADC region, given the prevalence of a considerable diversity in terms of legal frameworks and parliamentary frameworks nationally within the member states. For us, in order for us to satisfy the premises put forth, the Secretariat decided to facilitate the development of a reference document, foreseeing as follows: to put forth proposals about the points of view initially put forth by the members of the Parliamentary Forum, shared through a letter dated 8th July 2021. Clarification to be given about the development of a model law, know whether this model law will in fact interfere in the sovereignty or with internal processes of member states, to provide an explanation about the manners through which the parliaments at national level may promote and protect the constitutionalism and the rule of law, to determine the pros and cons about the development of a SADC model law, about the promotion and protection of constitutionalism and of the rule of law, and to determine likewise the implications about the development of such model law on the national sovereignty in member states and of member states. This reference document was compiled by the illustrious judge and resource person in the attendant in the session. The honorables will recall certainly that illustrious justice was one of the resource people who made a presentation about the function of parliaments in the promotion and protection of constitutionalism and of the rule of law in the SADC region during our meeting in April of the current year. It is up to me, and I have the pleasure to invite the justice to, at the moment, put to us his presentation. Please.
Thank you very, very much, Madam Chairperson, for your very kind and glowing remarks regarding my person. I appreciate your kind sentiments. So allow me to recognize your presence and to recognize the presence of honorable members of parliaments from all the SADC regions, from our SADC region, and to recognize the distinguished participants, the Secretary General of SADC-PF, Boyemo Sokoma. And just permit me, Madam Chair, to say all protocol observed. I am delighted and truly humbled, as always, to be in the company of such eminent persons, members of parliament from our region, who represent the collective will of our people, they being a result of democratic elections in their own countries. I express my deep gratitude for the opportunity to share this intellectual moment with honorable members on a topic that is very close to my heart, and on a topic which I also know is close to your hearts, as it is at the center of your mandate as members of parliament. The topic of discussion that I'm required to deal with relates to the SADC model law on the role of parliaments in promoting and protecting constitutionalism and the rule of law in the SADC region. I understand that this came about as a result of the deliberations of your 49th plenary assembly of the forum, hosted virtually by the Parliament of Botswana from the 25th to the 27th of June 2021, where you deliberated on the prospect of going ahead with a SADC model law on the role of parliaments in promoting and protecting constitutionalism and the rule of law in the SADC region. I understand also that following the above deliberations, it has become necessary for you to reflect and analyze the implications of conceiving and formulating the said model law in a broader context of the promotion of constitutionalism and the rule of law in the region. The terms of reference have been set out eloquently by the chair. It requires this paper, which I'm presenting to you, to deal with the issues that are implicated by that anticipated project, in particular around issues of sovereignty, clarify whether development of model law will interfere with sovereignty or internal processes of member states of SADC-PF, and to give explanations of the ways in which national parliaments can have a role in executing or protecting the rule of law and defending the Constitution. So, Madam Chair, permit me, if you may, to start off my remarks by saying that the matter of model laws is not anything new to yourselves, and it is not anything new to SADC-PF. So this is an important basic premise of departure. You have pioneered this field of model laws with distinction and excellence over the years. You are therefore easily, organizationally, the leading authority on pioneering model laws, on the importance of model laws, as in the last decade or so, even more than that, you are on record of having churned out a number of model laws. I will mention only a few, starting off with the model law on HIV/AIDS, the model law on ending child marriages, the model law on elections, and currently you are consulting, or the Secretariat is consulting, on the model law on GBV. So you are an authority on this field. It is an authority which you have traversed, as I say, with distinction in the past. I say this to underscore one important point, honorable members. The issues of which you require me to speak to, the issues of which constitute the terms of reference, the issues of sovereignty, and the issues of your own internal processes are not new. These are the issues that were necessarily and inherently implicated in the previous SADC model laws that I have mentioned. the issue of sovereignty that lies at the heart of this discourse that essentially speaks to the authority of the state to run its affairs has always been there with respect to other model laws. The issue of sovereignty in the contemporary era of which we live in, and in the context of the developments, legal and political, including your coming together under a collective body, necessarily implies some compromise to the rigidity or the rigid application of sovereignty. And as I say, by sovereignty, I mean the authority of the state to govern itself. Every state in SADC country has the authority to govern itself. But you, the various countries in the SADC region, have decided to come together collectively as SADC and to live together and to move together as one, as the region, anticipating in the course of time integration at various levels, and thereby softened the rigidity of the concept of sovereignty. Now, it is common cause that members of parliament have a constitutional obligation to provide oversight. That is one of your functions. And also, sitting as part of the collective, you also provide guidance on constitutionalism and on the rule of law and on democracy, on good governance. This particular meeting, Madam Chair, allow me to underscore this, and the importance of this particular topic has been given impetus or even more significance by the recent resolution of SADC at a meeting in Malawi, in which in principle there was a commitment going forward to the possibility of seeing in our lifetime SADC Parliament. So this is the context within which we interrogate this issue. And because of time constraints, I'll give an overview in order to guide the deliberations as to exactly what we are speaking to when we speak issues of constitutionalism, issues of rule of law, good governance, and democracy. Constitutionalism speaks to the following idea. It is the idea that is rooted and authorized legally by the SADC Treaty. Constitutionalism speaks to adherence to a constitutional system of government, meaning a system of government that accepts the authority of the Constitution as the supreme law of the land. Constitutionalism, it speaks to that. And all our member states are committed to that principle. It does exist side by side, together with sovereignty. Now, constitutionalism speaks to limited government. So it accepts that governments are subject to law and their powers are limited by law, and that they commit to subjecting themselves to the law. It also speaks to one fundamental concept or idea, that all exercise of public power, must be justifiable. That is what we mean when we talk about constitutionalism. And as I have said, this is authorized by the SADC Treaty, from whence you derive your legitimacy. I've already spoken about your role. It is not something that I need to spend time in. You know it better than me. But in order to facilitate the free flow of discussion, permit me with humility to remind you, and the chair has already done this, that you have an oversight role as part of constitutionalism. Because we must always remember that the concept of constitutionalism does not refer to having a constitution in your own countries. And as I often say, many countries with constitutions do not respect constitutionalism. To say this is not to engage in contradiction. Many countries with constitutions do not subscribe to constitutionalism. Why? Because they do not subject themselves to the law, and they engage in arbitrary governance. And as a result, although they may have constitutions, they do not follow constitutionalism. So members of parliament have a constitutional obligation to provide oversight on issues of constitutions, on issues of constitutionalism. This is a core function of all democratic parliaments. Alongside representation, alongside your very important work of lawmaking, alongside your functions of controlling the budget. And as part of your watchdog role, parliaments have a duty, therefore, to promote constitutionalism, to promote the rule of law, to promote democracy. And when we talk about the rule of law, these concepts overlap. But when we speak about the rule of law, we are talking about a set of ideas. But we also accept that the rule of law is fundamental to any functioning democracy. Without the rule of law, we cannot speak of democracy. So at its core, it implies that the government is accountable to the law, that citizens are equal under the law, that countries observe human rights, that minorities are protected, whatever minorities we're speaking about, minorities and vulnerable groups, minorities, vulnerable groups, marginalized groups in a democracy that respects the rule of law, that respects constitutionalism, must be protected. So the rule of law is often underpinned by an independent judiciary. And whilst it is accepted that parliaments have a duty to make laws, and no one disputes that, to pass laws, and the executive has a duty in terms of separation of powers to run national affairs, and that these three organs of the state, the executive, the judiciary, and parliament, must cooperate. None of them must veer into the lane of the other. Each one of them must respect the mandate of another. But all that being said, the rule of law says, constitutionalism says, that the province of saying what the law is lies solely with the courts. They are the final arbiters of that which the law says. And once they have pronounced what the law says, the rule of law says we must all follow suit. So the rule of law is attributed most of the time in the literature on constitutionalism and the rule of law to Dicey, who simplified the concept by saying, and it's very common to say it, that everyone is equal under the law. No person is above the law. That sentiment underlines and reinforces what constitutionalism is all about. So, I have canvassed these concepts and also indicated that these engagements that you are embarking upon, they are all authorized by the SADC Treaty and therefore do not conflict, in my respectful opinion, with sovereignty. They do not seek to interfere with your internal processes, but they recognize that as a collective body of parliamentarians, in your collective interest and pursuant to law, and pursuant to law here, I mean the SADC Treaty, pursuant to law, you have met to advance that which the treaty says you can do. And that insofar as it may impact on the rigidity of the concept of sovereignty, it does not, and I choose my words carefully, it does not nullify. It does not nullify the concept of sovereignty. So countries still have the authority to govern their own affairs without interference. If there be any compromise on that concept, it is because of the collective will of we, the people of SADC, having considered it necessary to do so. And when I say we, the people, I mean we, the people, through you, the elected representatives of the people in the region, having agreed that that is the way to go. So that is my answer with respect to those issues canvassed in the terms of reference. And I've sought to explain what all these concepts mean. And I've also explained the ways in which national parliaments can have a role in executing or protecting the rule of law. How can they do it? You can do that by setting an ideal normative framework about the independence of parliament, about the independence of the judiciary, about good governance, about constitutions that respect minorities, about obeying equality. You can set out a normative framework. You have done it before, and you have said this normative framework we shall call the SADC model law, and is not necessarily binding on its terms once adopted, but countries are at liberty to choose and pick which of its provisions are appealing to the circumstances, the history of each and every country. Because as the SADC Secretary General is often emphasized, this is soft law, not binding, but it sets the normative framework. You can choose, individual parliaments in the region, they can choose to domesticate the entire model law on constitutionalism and the rule of law. They can also choose not to domesticate some aspects which they're uncomfortable with. We know that when it's easier to say, as I do now, that constitutionalism requires you to protect the rights of minorities and vulnerable groups. I know, and you also know, that when we sit down to unpack what that exactly means, we may differ. South Africa may say something different, Zimbabwe may see it differently, Botswana may see it differently. But the fact that there is an overarching normative framework only means that it serves as a guide. as a reference material to guide you. So yes, you can, if you wish, decide as you have done before that we will have a normative framework on constitutionalism and the rule of law. And you would say, among other things, and you have done so before, that, to give you just an example, that all the elections conducted in all SADC countries shall comply with the following conditions or requirements or principles. I mean, in your SADC model law on constitutionalism and the rule of law, you'll be entitled to regulate. You have already done so about the nature and character of the elections, how you want them to be run. You will revisit the issue of rights and say, what do you want to expand? What do you want to leave out? You'll revisit the issue of open democracy. Some of you would then agree that it is part of good governance to legislate on freedom of information, to legislate on declaration of assets by members of parliament and the leadership of the country. Others may say we are not going that direction, which is fine. I'm only giving this as an example to say it will be within your rights to set the normative framework around these issues, and it will be entirely legitimate, as I keep on emphasizing that you have done so before. The AU has also done it with respect to elections, with respect to its charter, Human Rights and People's Charter, that speaks to the nature and character of the human rights within the African framework. That is part of constitutionalism. It is there in place. So it will be, you will not be reinventing the wheel in consolidating all those efforts under your own framework as SADC. It will not be in conflict, as I say, or at least it will not be in conflict in a manner that is fundamentally objectionable. I will therefore, having given that broad framework towards the conclusion, give a summary of the answers to the terms of reference questions in the following manner. Having regard to all that I have said, it is plain, by way of summary, that the development of the model law will not interfere with the sovereignty or internal processes of parliaments in a manner that is fundamentally objectionable, in my respectful and considered view. This is so because states exercise liberty to be or not to be influenced by modern laws. I need to emphasize this point. This is because states exercise liberty, they exercise freedom, they exercise choice as to whether to be or not to be influenced by modern laws. They can choose. It is for them to choose to be inspired or not to be inspired. It is part of sovereignty to make that choice. It is up to states to choose which elements of the modern law to adopt, to modify, or abandon. Modern laws may be helpful to modern states in more ways than one. One, they can set best practice and benchmarking. Two, in resource-poor countries, modern laws may be a cheaper way of gaining technical capacity. As a matter of fact, most of the issues for legislation have a universal bearing beyond national interest. To this extent, modern laws serve as a very useful benchmarking tool. National parliaments have many ways of honoring the rule of law and constitutionalism. Members of parliament enjoy comparative advantage in legislative making and other oversight functions. And it is in this respect that they can play an important role in promoting the rule of law and constitutionalism. This they can do by one, enacting laws that promote democracy, that promote open society, that promote a rights-based living. You know, our governance system needs to be underwritten by human rights. We need to embrace the human rights approach and put it at the very center of governance. It is not just in the interest of us, the current generation, it's also in the interest of future generations to come. It does unleash the potential of our people to develop their country unconstrained or chained by repressive governmental measures. The advantage for member states in relation to the development of model law on constitutionalism and the rule of law is that it sets standards that member states can aspire to. The disadvantages, if any, insofar that they may be, if we seek to draw blood or water from stone and say that there are any fundamental disadvantages. If they are, and I concede they may, then they are by far overwhelmed, overpowered by the advantages. In conclusion, Madam Chair, assuming that I'm still in time, I have sought in this paper to argue that SADC-PF, through its model laws, can assist parliaments in the region to aspire to best democratic ideals through coming up with a model law on constitutionalism and the rule of law, and that in so doing, they will not be reinventing the wheel, they will simply be continuing with a journey which they have done with distinction and excellence. I have read references to this path that SADC-PF has followed in many articles across the globe, and almost without fail, SADC-PF has been lionized and praised for setting these standards for good governance with respect to rights and other issues. I will therefore, if you permit me, Madam Chair, rest my submission this far and await any engagements from yourselves. Thank you for listening. Much appreciated, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor, for your presentation. We are really grateful, Judge, for your very informative presentation. Now, the floor is open for discussion following this presentation. Honorable colleagues, the session is open. Anyone wishing to take the floor, please? I recognize the Vice President. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. And thank you very much to the Honorable Professor and I think Judge as well, as I know. Very interesting to note and to hear the different points and opinions. I must say that I'm always enthused by the role model law because it's something that has inspired me in the sense that if SADC adopted the role model law in that all countries aspire to it, as the judge says, it's an aspiration. And because all countries have the liberty to adopt certain aspects of it, I've always seen it more as a roadmap that countries aspire, that they start with something, at least they put their foot in the water, and that they want to work towards that role model that that in the end they would adopt 100% of that role model law to ensure that the region is united. and that we would get to a point that if this region and the regional parliament was actually one, that we could actually almost be the first region that would be able to be the united region that would have its own economy, shared economy, ease of passage. You would not need a visa. You wouldn't even need to know there was a border between, let's say, Zimbabwe and South Africa, or Eswatini and South Africa, that it would be just so easy to move around, because everything looked the same and everything operated the same. And because we're going from the free trade agreements and progressing that way, that the role model law would cover that, that we would aspire to that. I think what's missing, though, and we've seen it with almost the loyalties to the countries, is that sometimes within the country, we might adopt the law, and the politicians might see it one way, the judiciary might see it another way, and where there's a separation of state and judiciary, and there's a strong separation, we still see that country still has a strong, should I say, there's a strong chance of the role model law being adopted, and there's hope for the role model law being adopted. But I think what's missing is an ombudsman, is a possibility of a role of an ombudsman for the whole of SADC. And what I'd be interested, though, is how powerful that role would be, though, because I think what would be needed is that SADC would be able to refer to an ombudsman and say, but in this country, SADC has the role model law. This country has their laws, but this country is not. This country has not participated. They subscribe to SADC, and therefore they subscribe indirectly to what we're trying to achieve in SADC, but their country is doing something that is contrary to what we're trying to achieve in SADC, which could have effect on, let's say, free trade. It could have effect on bringing growth and development to the region. It could have an effect on the future security of our people, let's say. So I think there's also, I'd be interested to see what the opinion is in terms of an ombudsman, and whether that would be useful in terms of trying to get countries on board or to subscribe to getting their legislation aspired more towards role model law, even if we put a timeline to it, that it's a timeline of over a decade, at least, let's say 5 or 10 years, that we start working towards it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Vice President, for your comments. Honorable members, colleagues, any more comments, inputs? The floor is open. We seem not to have any requests for the floor. As such, I'd like to thank Professor Lingat for your brilliant presentation, and for always being available to support our committee and for equipping us with further tools as we discharge our role. As such, we finalized session 1.
Thank you very much, Chair. I appreciate it.
Agora. Muito obrigada. Passamos agora para.
Next, we move to session 2. Honorable members, in this next session, session 2, we have 2 presentations on the theme peace, security, and conflict trends in the SADC region, strengthening Parliament's role in conflict prevention and management. The first presenter for this session is Mr. Jorge Cardoso, Director, SADC Organ on Politics, Defense, and Security. Then we'll have His Excellency the Ambassador Said Jinit, Special Advisor from the African Center for the Constructive Resolution of Disputes. So these are resources persons that will share their presentations with us, and then we'll have a plenary discussion.
Muito obrigada, distinta deputada Jerónimo Agostinho.
Thank you very much, distinguished Honorable Agostinho, Chair of the committee, the Permanent Committee for Democratization, Governance and Human Rights of the SADC Parliamentary Forum. I start by saying that it is an honor for me to participate in this work session. And I would begin by greeting and saluting the SADC Parliamentary Forum for having inscribed in its agenda this subject matter, which is clearly relevant to our region of Southern Africa. And that has to do with that which could be, which ought to be the role of our national parliaments, but above all, at the level of the region, such a role that is insurmountable, it is fundamental in what has to do with the prevention of conflicts, as well as the management of same. So, Madam Chair, the presentation that I will be making was prepared in English, and in such context, I will request your indulgence so that I may do exactly that, present in English.
Chairperson of the Standing Committee on Democratization, Governance, and Human Rights of the SADC Parliamentary Forum, honorable members of Parliament from the SADC region, Ms. Boemo Sekoma, Secretary General of the SADC Parliamentary Forum, Excellency, my dear brother, Ambassador Said Jinit, Special Advisor, African Center for Constructive Resolution and of Disputes, which is also known short as ACOD, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Secretary Executive Secretary of the Southern Africa Development Community, His Excellency Mr. Elias Mahosi, I wish to thank the SADC-PF for the invitation to participate in this important meeting of the SADC-PF Standing Committee on Democratization, Governance, and Human Rights. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the SADC region continues in great extent to enjoy sustained peace and security, and the political environment remains stable, despite low level of political interstate tension.
Recording in progress.
Brigade, since 2013, in support to the United Nations Organization Stabilization Mission, also known as the MONUSCO, and the support from our region through the FIB is of great importance in terms of stabilizing the insecurity in the eastern region of the DRC. In the long term, SADC endeavors to increase its efforts to strengthen existing member states' mediation support capacities to effectively and peacefully resolve intrastate conflicts and provide capacity building for the conflict prevention and preventive diplomacy mechanisms, as well as bolster the national infrastructures for peace in general. All these efforts will guarantee SADC's preparedness for proactive responses to possible conflict situations, which the region requires for achieving durable and sustainable peace, and to fulfill its regional integration agenda, as espoused in the SADC 2050 vision and the regional indicative strategic development plan for the period of 2020-2030. As you may know, the notion of infrastructure for peace refers to institutions, processes, policies, as well as constructive relationships which contribute to peace building. Peace infrastructures do take different forms of organizational structures, mainly premised on the local culture, institutional traditions, and needs within a particular context. Most countries have local peace committees, national peace platforms, and government departments or ministries that support and develop strategies for peace building, conflict analysis, and early warning as response systems, or development of conflict management skills, including through insider mediators, as well as policies and initiatives promoting a shared culture of peace. It is our firm belief that these institutional setups and mechanisms, which do exist in all our member states in the form of national infrastructure for peace, are a credible and constructive partner for peace building and conflict prevention, mediation, and resolution. To this end, it is well documented that parliamentarians can serve not only as a platform for dialogue, unity, and reconciliation, but also play a vital role in conflict prevention and resolution. The SADC Parliamentary Forum is therefore one of the key strategic institutions constituting a regional infrastructure for peace. I wish to put an emphasis and perhaps just repeat, indicating that it is our firm belief that the SADC Parliamentary Forum is one of the key institutions constituting a regional infrastructure for peace. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, since 2020, SADC has launched a mapping exercise of regional and national infrastructures for peace, seeking at least to achieve the following objectives. One, identify the nature of regional and national infrastructure for peace. Two, assess their mandates, operational modalities, and their human and financial capacities. And 3, identify their strengths, weaknesses, and areas where improvements are required. As we speak, as of today, the mapping exercise has been conducted in 8 member states, specifically in the Democratic Republic of Congo, the Kingdom of Lesotho, the Republics of Malawi, Mozambique, Namibia, South Africa, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. The mapping was an opportunity for the Secretariat to assess the human, technical, and financial capacities and challenges of the national infrastructure for peace in terms of peace building, conflict prevention, and resolution. This exercise will continue in order to cover the remaining member states. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, in our regional mapping exercise, we find that the SADC Parliamentary Forum is an important representative institution for the SADC citizenry, thereby serving as a valid interlocutor for the political and security needs and desires of the general public. It brings national parliaments together across political party lines and the national boundaries in pursuit of strengthening SADC's capacity to address peace and security. The SADC-PF has been visible through its involvement in election observation missions, in addition to its active promotion of electoral standards to mitigate the risks of electoral-related conflicts. Let me also emphasize a very critical role that the Parliament, the Parliamentary Forum has been playing, which has been covered in the previous session, which is the conceptualization of model laws, which guides our member states in terms of best practices of implementing specific issues to amplify and improve and also strengthen democracy, good governance through constitutionalism. Furthermore, the SADC Parliamentary Forum has made an effective and collaborative effort to ensure that peace and stability in Southern Africa region benefits from a systematic effort aimed at institutional capacity building of these mechanisms and institutions. In order to strengthen its role further, it is imperative that the SADC-PF considers building upon its current portfolio of interventions by deepening perspectives on the following. 1, empower national parliaments as actors in conflict prevention, mediation, and post-conflict recovery. 2, promote the involvement of national parliaments in conflict prevention and the silencing of guns. 3, enhance the legislative and oversight capacity of national parliaments to prevent and manage conflicts and or electoral violence. 4, strengthen collaboration with the civil society organizations to respond to the challenges of gender-based violence in the region. 5, share knowledge and lessons learned. And lastly, facilitate the participation of members of parliament in mediation and conflict analysis, skill training offered by the SADC Secretariat and other organizations in order to strengthen the support to mediation processes in our region. The SADC Parliamentary Forum could also promote the sensitization of the citizenry and their representatives on regional frameworks and protocols and the domestication thereof, addressing the prevention, combating and eradication of illicit manufacturing of firearms, ammunition, and other related materials because of their links with inter alia, the drug trafficking, terrorism, transnational organized crime, mercenarism, and other violent criminal activities. Raising awareness on these imperatives and providing guidance through model laws could further enhance the combating of contemporary threats of proliferation of small arms and light weapons in our region, and promote best practices and standards for prevention and combating illicit proliferation, circulation, and trafficking of firearms, ammunition, and related materials. Distinguished gentlemen, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, you will concur with me that the prevention of conflicts and consolidation of peace and sustainable development are the backbone for the regional integration process. Without this strong foundation of peace and development, the momentous strides in the regional integration made in the past 40 years will be undermined. As alluded to at the beginning of my remarks, it is noteworthy that the region has over the past 3 decades systematically developed relevant mechanisms to address various forms of conflicts. Honorable Chairperson, ladies and gentlemen, to illustrate these milestones in greater detail, let me highlight some of the key developments since the dawn of the millennium in regard to the establishment of the region's peace and security architecture. Since the early 2000s, the SADC member states have established in earnest interlinked structures as part of the mediation, conflict prevention, and preventive diplomacy structures, as well as early warning and response systems, which include the mediation, conflict prevention, and preventive diplomacy structure, which is an area bringing together what we call the panel of elders, the mediation reference group, and the mediation support unit. Their role is to enhance SADC capacity for and expertise in mediation, conflict prevention, preventive diplomacy, and thereby improve the prospect of success in regional efforts to prevent and resolve significant inter- and intrastate conflicts in the SADC region. 2, the SADC Electoral Advisory Council, which advises the organ on politics, defense, and security cooperation on matters of election, democracy, and good governance, and on mediation strategies whenever it's required. 3, the Regional Early Warning Center, whose role is to strengthen the SADC mechanisms to prevent conflict, to manage conflicts, and also to resolve in line with the provisions of the Protocol on Politics, Defense, and Security Cooperation and the Strategic Indicative Plan of the organ through tracking threats. The early warning mechanism is therefore a very important tool which enable us to identify triggers of conflict in order for the region to be able to prevent its full eclosion into conflict. Another important element in this peace architecture is the SADC Standby Force, which is tasked to respond to natural disasters and security threats, including terrorism and interstate as well as intrastate conflicts. And I wish to also once again recall that currently we are deployed both in the DRC as well as in the Cabo Delgado province through the deployment of the SADC Standby Force. Another very important institution, distinguished participants, is the Regional Peacekeeping Training Center. It's an institution which is based in Harare, Zimbabwe, which provides specialized training in conflict analysis, mediation, among other things, but specifically supporting and increasing our capacity for the region to be able to intervene in peace support operations and humanitarian assistance when required. It is a reality that climate change over the past few years have increased in terms of intensity and frequency, you will recall, distinguished members and participants and members of parliament, that maybe 15 years ago, we would have adverse natural phenomena once per year, but currently we have been having 3 or 4 adverse natural disasters in our region, which also impacts on the social stability and security in our region. Let me complete by stating another very important undertaking in terms of putting together this peace architecture, which is the regional logistics depot. Once completed, will provide for storage, inspection, and maintenance of equipment and materials for all components of the SADC Standby Force and the Regional Counterterrorism Center, which will be launched later this year, as a direct response to the rise of the terrorism in our region. Let me indicate, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, that the Regional Counterterrorism Center is going to be hosted by the United Republic of Tanzania, and currently we are finalizing the operationalization towards its inauguration, as I indicated, later this year. Ladies and gentlemen, the transformation of the parliamentary forum into a SADC parliament and its roadmap was approved by the SADC summit held in Malawi in August this year. A protocol establishing the composition, powers, functions, and procedures of the parliament will be drafted, and the process towards amending the SADC treaty will equally follow, enabling the parliament to become a full-fledged SADC institution. In view of this historical decision, we now have a solid foundation to work collaboratively with the SADC Parliamentary Forum at many levels in strengthening the region's capacity to sustain the peace and prevent or manage existing conflict as an integral part towards political and security stability, as well as the consolidation of democracy. In this regard, allow me to congratulate all members of parliament from our member states for this important milestone, amplifying the voice of the people and the ordinary citizens into the regional integration process. As the region begins to implement the regional indicative strategic development plan for the period of 2020-2030, guided by the SADC Vision 2050, which underscores that peace is a foundational pillar for our development as a region, we have to continue to strengthen our capacity to undertake threat assessments, monitor potential flashpoints, and devise appropriate tools to track and respond to them in a timely manner. Building a critical mass of cross-sectoral mediators, conflict analysts, and facilitators at national and regional level should therefore remain a major priority for us as a region in our endeavor to strengthen our peace and security architecture in the long term. As I conclude, allow me to thank and applaud the SADC Parliamentary Forum for its continued efforts in enhancing democracy and good governance in our region. As a secretariat, we remain committed to work hand in glove with the Parliamentary Forum towards realizing the objectives of our region, specifically in terms of peace, security, and stability. And allow me to once again indicate that we do expect a greater role of the SADC Parliamentary Forum in terms of supporting all the peace initiatives, as well as becoming a key player when it comes to conflict prevention, management, and resolution. Thank you so much, Honorable Chairperson, for this occasion. And I wish to stop here in conclusion of my remarks. I hand over to you, Madam Chairperson. Thank you.
Honorable Chair, you are muted. Sorry, Honorable Chair, you are muted. Your mic is muted, Honorable Chair.
Muito obrigada, senhor Jorge Cardoso. Agora convido o senhor embaixador Said a proferir a sua apresentação.
Madam Chairperson and honorable members of the SADC Parliamentary Forum, Standing Committee on Democratization, Governance and Human Rights. Dear colleague George Cardoso, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate the opportunity to address you today on behalf of the African Center for the Constructive... Sorry?
You may proceed, Ambassador.
Thank you.
Agora sim.
It's okay? Yeah, I was saying that I really appreciate the opportunity to address your August Assembly today on behalf of the African Center for the Constructive Resolution of Conflicts. First, I must commend your efforts and of those who came before you for having steered the work of this forum in order to ensure that it is able to hold its Golden Jubilee Plenary Assembly. This is indeed a worthwhile achievement given all the challenges, the heavy load on your shoulders in your respective national parliaments. I am sure that you will continue to pay witness to the growth of this forum. I am also glad that I am addressing the Standing Committee on Democratization, Governance and Human Rights, although I'm speaking on the issue of conflict trends in the region. This, I think, is an indication that this forum and you as members have realized that it is not always possible to neatly separate these issues, and that indeed issues of bad governance, disregard of human rights, failure to consolidate democracy, and constitutional changes of governments and other factors are constitutive of some of the triggers of the many violent conflicts and societal tensions we have seen in this region and elsewhere in our continent.
ICT, could you assist to...
Is it okay? Shall I continue?
Just a moment, Ambassador. ICT, could you assist to mute the chair's mic, please?
All right.
Thank you. You may proceed, Ambassador.
Thank you. Let me start my input today by recalling a seminal document drafted in 1990, almost 30 years ago, by the former Secretary General of the then Organization of the African Unity, the distinguished Dr. Salim Ahmed Salim, entitled Report of the Secretary General on the Fundamental Changes taking place in the world and their implication for Africa, proposal for African response. In this report, Salim Ahmed Salim correctly observed that, I quote, "The political situation in Africa today is bedeviled by various conflicts that threaten not only human rights and social order, but also prospects for the survival, economic development, and even the sovereignty of some states. 41 years later, in spite of many noble and notable efforts to rid Africa of conflicts, I dare say that we still faced with daunting challenges, including in this region. This only means more work collectively still needs to be done. Madam Chairperson, it has been almost 2 years since the world learned of COVID-19, a virus first identified in Asia and which soon spread throughout the world, affecting almost every single person in the world in one way or another. There have been more than 230 million confirmed cases and more than 4.8 million confirmed deaths because of COVID-19. The pandemic has forced the world to pay a large forfeit in human lives in less than 2 years. COVID-19 has fundamentally affected the way in which people have had to go about their daily lives in countries across the world. The wearing of surgical face masks was once reserved for doctors about to undertake a surgical procedure, but now is a common practice. Leaving the house without wearing one makes someone feel not properly dressed. We have also had to change the way we live our lives, working from home, interacting physically with our colleagues and friends less, and staying at home as much as we could, not only for our own safety, but also for the safety of others. Beyond the personal impact of COVID-19, the lockdown implemented to prevent or slow the spread of the virus also brought whole economies to a grinding halt, affecting international trade, job creation, and job security. Many businesses have had to close down due to the lockdowns, whilst many others struggle to keep afloat. The economic impact of COVID-19 has just been as great as the healthcare impacts of the virus. In Southern Africa, the COVID-19 has only served to exacerbate a number of issues facing the SADC region, such as poverty, unemployment, and inequality. Whilst making these issues worse, COVID-19 has also made it difficult to put measures and processes in place to deal with these problems, further compounding the issue. Beyond poverty, unemployment, and inequality, there has been issues relating to governance and insecurity in the region that have been prevalent for many years. COVID-19 has had a negative impact on a number of areas in the SADC region, but there has been also a number of positive aspects to come during this period, with democratic consolidation being one of them. Since the early 90s, Southern Africa states have undergone substantial political transformations, which has seen some of the countries shift from one-party states to multi-party democracies. To this end, Africa has seen the end of many authoritarian regimes, thus creating fertile ground to the establishment of the rules-based governance systems characterized by constitutional democracy and underpinned by inter alia, regular, free and fair elections, freedom of association, free press, and the peaceful transfer of power. This process of democratic consolidation reflects a positive trend in the region. However, these transformations have not been consistently smooth throughout the region, and many countries will still struggle to entrench and institutionalize democracy. The shift from one-party states to multi-party democracy was very sudden, and consequently, as experienced elsewhere in the world, a culture of democratic practice is taking longer to evolve in some parts of Southern Africa. In many parts of the world, democratic governance is underpinned by the level of socioeconomic development that creates diverse opportunities that allow for the diffusion of power and influence across society. Indeed, some of the measures put in place to curb the spread of COVID-19 have had an impact in subverting the work of democratization in SADC region. The lack of economic transformation in many societies in the region and the economic destruction brought by COVID-19 has increased the already constrained economic opportunities. Consequently, political office, which comes with financial rewards, will more than likely become a highly contested, sometimes violently contested terrain, thus at times contributing to national instability with the potential for regional spillover effects. Many Southern African countries have already held elections over the last 18 months with varying outcomes, which included the reports of electoral irregularities, instances of violent protests, complaints relating to the access of information, and independent media coverage. However, of greater significance and an occasion to be proud of are the experiences where recently held elections proceeded without much political hindrance, such as in Namibia, Malawi, and Zambia. In Namibia, peaceful local and regional elections were held on 25th of November 2020. The shifting grounds for the first time visible in the National Assembly and presidential elections of November 2019 have triggered further impacts on voting behavior and patterns. Namibians are entering a new era, and it is not yet clear how this will play out in the years to come. The Southwest Africa People Organization, SWAPO of Namibia, lost control of more than 19 constituencies countrywide. These results have displaced the party as a major power player in key economic hubs such as Walvis Bay, Windhoek, Swakopmund, and Zambezi region and the south of Namibia. SWAPO has enjoyed control of regional councils and various local authorities since 1992, and the decline in support will see the former liberation movement go into the next presidential elections in 2024 as an opposition on some local and regional levels. All in all, the competing political parties and cultures in Namibia are indicative of a healthy and prospering democracy, one in which democratic hiccups are part of healthy pluralism, as long as the forms of exchange are not dominated by mere playing to the gallery and are rather guided by substance. Malawi became only the second African country ever to annul the presidential elections after Kenya did so in 2017, and became the first in which the opposition won the rerun. The initial May 2019 vote has seen incumbent Peter Mutharika narrowly return to the presidency. However, in February 2020, the landmark ruling by Malawi's Constitutional Court canceled the results, citing widespread, systematic, and grave irregularities, including the use of corrective fluid in vote tallying and the Malawi Electoral Commission failure to address complaints before announcing results. New elections were ordered within 150 days. The fresh polls on 23 June 2020 saw the coming together of Lazarus Chakwera and the Malawi Congress Party and running mate Saulus Chilima and United Transformation Movement to head a coalition of 9 opposition parties, having fiercely competed as the leading challengers previously. The Constitutional Court ruling also served to transform Malawi's electoral system, replacing a first-past-the-post model with one demanding an outright majority. In tandem with the Stick Digital campaign, the new alliance traveled widely to hold rallies across Malawi. it would be a strategy that ultimately delivered Chakwera to the presidency, polling 58% of votes to Mutharika's 39%. Political opposition elsewhere in Africa should take note from Malawi's coalition that dialogue, not division, can offer a genuine path to change. Malawi showed institutional resilience in this period, supporting the process of democratization. Former President Mutharika was unable to call upon military support as the Malawi Defense Forces have moved to shield protesting citizens and protect the judiciary since the 2019 election. The MDF also had previous practice in this respect, having defended then Vice President Joy Banda's constitutional right to assume the presidency after the incumbent's death in 2012. It is in this institutional resilience from the army that would ultimately facilitate a smooth and mostly peaceful election process during the rerun, despite Mutharika's attempt to intervene by replacing the MDF's commander and his deputy in March 2020. Indeed, neighboring Zambia certainly did well to heed this example ahead of its own election in 2021. Zambia held general election on 12 August 2021 to elect the president, National Assembly, mayors, and councillors. Against formidable odds, on Thursday, 24 August 2021, the president-elect of the United Party for National Development was sworn in as Zambia's seventh president. Hakainde Hichilema won the 12 August presidential poll with a resounding 59.4% of the vote against incumbent President Edgar Lungu of the Patriotic Front, who obtained 38.3%. The concluded election in Zambia was a breath of fresh air for a region battered by disputed and often conflictual electoral cycles and indicative of a positive trend in the region. Such was the scale of democratic backsliding during the last days of President Lungu's tenure that in 2020, the Varieties of Democracy Project, a leading source of information on indicators of democratic progress of regression, noted with concern that Zambia has registered a remarkably rapid decline in the quality of democracy since the previous election. Amnesty International also reported that Zambia was on the brink of a human rights crisis, claiming that Lungu was using repressive tactics to win another term in office. Notwithstanding the odds, the determination of Zambians to have a final say in the election was remarkable and a lesson to all who live under systems still undergoing political transformation, reminding the oppressed people of Nelson Mandela's remarks that, I quote, "It always seems impossible until it is done." One may find cause to celebrate the Zambian election not just because of its outcome, but because the collective will of the people ultimately prevailed, and because the Zambian experience provides useful lessons on the entrenchment of electoral democracy in Africa. Democracy cannot be taken for granted. Sadly, elections in Africa are not always about the will of the electorate, but rather, in some instances, unfortunately, the will of the incumbent. Zambia, like Namibia and Malawi, have shown us that the shift away from this tradition is possible and indeed achievable. There is often a popular misconception that political electoral outcomes are a zero-sum game. This has manifested in many cases by the rejection of electoral outcomes where there is a view that the winners gets everything and that the losers are denied access to state power and resources in the best case scenario. In the worst case scenario, there is a complete denigration of the political rights of the opposition, and the politics of exclusion in the post-electoral political arrangements has raised a number of questions. It is a question that many countries, not only in this region, but elsewhere in Africa, are grappling with and will continue to grapple with. The political arrangements for democratic governance, the question of power sharing arrangements, and the question of dealing with transitional situation in very fragile situation are critical issues, because of lack of awareness of these points creates a threat to security. When we talk about the control of state resources and the economic situation, the question of whether or not democracy is sustainable is at the heart of the situation. And the poor economic condition, it is going to be difficult for democracy to take root. Those who are underserved are going to make very legitimate demands which the state may be able to meet, may not be able to meet. But there are positive trends upon which to draw from. On these trends bode well for the project of democratization in Southern Africa. Fair distribution of resources and justice are strong pillars of democracy, especially when the country's resources are limited. Sentiments of injustice, exclusion, and marginalization generally feed revolts that sometimes manifest themselves during electoral processes. While Southern Africa has made gains in democratic consolidation, there is an erosion in regional cohesion when it comes to conflict prevention. One such example is the conflict in Cabo Delgado in northern Mozambique. Cabo Delgado is one of the poorest regions of Mozambique, lacking in a number of services such as water, electricity, and education, with the literacy rate in Cabo Delgado being one of the lowest in the country. Cabo Delgado is lacking in economic development and job creation, with many people experiencing a low standard of living. Following the discovery of natural gas off the coast, the promise of large international investments and job creation in the region did not come to fruition, as foreigners were brought into the region to occupy jobs which locals hoped might go to them. The conditions in Cabo Delgado made a fertile ground for conflicts, as the root causes of conflicts collided with anger around the investments in the region and divisions around ethnic and religious lines that is spurring mobilization in the region. The threats of conflicts in Cabo Delgado was a long time in the making and not something people simply woke up to one morning. The warnings, sign of conflicts in Cabo Delgado had been brewing for a number of years. Yet when the attack of the city of Palma took place in April 2021, the regional and international observers were still taken by surprise by the scale and intensity of the attack. It was only after the attack of the scale of which we saw in Palma that the world's attention was drawn to the conflict in Cabo Delgado, and the desire to address the conflicts was intensified. The Mozambique government turned to private military companies to try to regain sovereign control over Cabo Delgado in support of its, of course, military troops. However, PMCs notoriously lack transparency. Knowledge and information sharing between PMCs and national militaries is often low, meaning that national militaries and government may not gain a full understanding of the status of the conflict taking place within its country. Added to that, the Dike Advisory Group, a South African PMC, whose activities are outlawed by South African law, and who played a key role in evacuating civilians out of Palma during the attacks of the city, has been accused by Amnesty International of killing civilians during their operation in Cabo Delgado. The lack of oversight that accompanies PMCs is thus problematic for a number of regions due to the opaque nature in which they operate. Stronger regional protocols are needed in the region if the region hopes to better legislate and monitor the activities of PMCs in Southern Africa. PMCs have a long history in Africa and have been used in a number of different countries during a number of different conflicts. Many African countries have turned to PMCs to assist the government in regaining control over territories that have come under the control of rebel groups. Despite Africa's commitment to silencing the guns, conflicts have continued to rage across the continent. This fact makes it likely that PMCs will have a significant role to play on the continent as they continue to play key roles in conflicts across the continent, in spite of the standing decision by the African Union against the use of PMCs in Africa. Although the Southern Africa region does not experience as much armed conflicts as other regions, mechanisms for oversight of their activities are needed in order to ensure that they operate within the law and do not carry out any activities that might be considered human rights violation. While wars are still generally understood to take place between states, recent history has shown that this is no longer the full story, as we have seen a number of non-state actors engaging in conflicts within the state. In 1996, SADC created the Organ on Politics, Defense and Security, an institutional framework for coordinating policies and activities on politics, defense, and security. However, the efficacy of the organ was considerably enhanced when the SADC passed the Protocol on Politics, Defense, and Security Cooperation on 14th August 2001. This protocol establishes the objectives of the organ on politics, defense, and security, namely promoting peace and security across Southern Africa, protecting the region's people from instability to the breakdown of law and order, developing a common foreign policy throughout the region, and cooperating on matters related to security and defense. The protocol also specifies the operating structures of the organ, the chairperson, troika, and various committees, and these structures, responsibilities, systems of appointments, and procedures of operation. Moreover, it provides guidelines for the organ's jurisdiction, methods, and procedures, and the relationship with international agreements and extra SADC nations. Article 11, Section 1C states that the organ has the responsibility to manage and resolve inter- and intrastate conflicts by peaceful means. Further, Article 11 at 3B characterizes such conflicts as conditions of civil war or insurgency and large-scale violence between sections of the population or between the state and sections of the population, including genocide, ethnic cleansing, and gross violation of human rights. Further, any conflict which threatens peace and security in the region or territory or another state party is also considered a significant intrastate conflict. Indeed, we have seen activities in the region which could be defined as conflict necessitating the organ to act in swift accordance with the framework such as in Eswatini, Cabo Delgado, Mozambique, and previously in Lesotho. However, many have criticized the organ for being slow to act on these issues, allowing the mitigation mechanism to become moot as the conflict incidences increase. Despite knowledge of a growing insurgency in northern Mozambique in 2017, the organ was slow to act and only acted to deploy the SADC standby force in 2021 after Palma was attacked and foreign nationals killed. This is similar to the SADC response to the ongoing unrest situation in the Kingdom of Eswatini, where SADC communiques have not made mention of the situation in the kingdom. Although the deployment of an assessment mission in July is commendable and a step in the right direction, it is clear that more still needs to be done in Eswatini by SADC to open up and expand the frontiers of dialogue. These issues might lead one to believe that, like the African Union instruments, SADC protocols are not being fully embraced at a national level by state parties, or that political considerations seem to threaten the legitimate authority of the organ. SADC may not be perfect, and nobody will ignore that a number of challenges remain 20 years after SADC was established. Much work remains to create a SADC which is an effective body of regional cooperation and integration. The role of parliaments at a national level is to legislate and conduct oversight. This SADC Parliamentary Forum was created as a platform to debate and discuss on matters of common national interest. The former president of South Africa, Thabo Mbeki, once said, I quote, As Africans, we need to share common recognition that all of us stand to lose if we fail to transform our continent. The only way the continent can be transformed is if the continent works together to transform itself. It is for this reason that forums such as this one are so important and have the potential to play an influential role in the transformation of the region and, by extension, the continent into one of growth and prosperity. The SADC Parliamentary Forum is in a position to influence and ensure that SADC protocols that are signed and ratified are properly implemented at the national level in a way that ensures that national laws are harmonized with SADC protocols. This will help in ensuring that SADC protocols are implemented as well as possible, and with the collective understanding that what is required of member states' national legislatures. The SADC protocol on gender and development is a pertinent protocol which comes into force in 2013 and which was amended in 2016. The issue of gender-based violence persists in the region and remains an issue of public interest and as seen through the recent protests against GBV in Namibia being just one example. SADC is seen by the rest of African countries as a model region. The effective implementation of the SADC decisions and instruments by its member states will not only enhance the credibility of this regional grouping, but will constitute a great boost to the African Union. According to the Amnesty International, the COVID-19 pandemic has resulted in an increase in gender-based violence, especially against women and girls throughout the SADC region. The lockdown made it difficult for women to leave abusive relationships and to leave their homes in order to seek protection and help from their abusers. It was also difficult for young girls to escape abuse as they remained at home, meaning they were subject to abuse that they would have otherwise avoided if they were in school. After the first week of lockdown in South Africa, the police reported 2,300 calls for help on issues relating to gender-based violence in that week alone. Across the board in Mozambique, civil society organizations reported a high number of gender-based violence incidents during the lockdown in the country. Many governments in the region failed to incorporate measures to combat gender-based violence in their lockdown structures, further exacerbating the GBV problem. Gender-based violence, GBV, is not a new phenomenon in the region and is something that governments and societies in the region have been grappling with for years. While the trend is not new, the COVID-19 pandemic has shown a need for greater emphasis to be placed on issues relating to gender-based violence in Southern Africa. Protocols such as the Gender and Development Protocol thus become important tools in addressing an issue faced by all countries in the region. States in the SADC region need to share policies and best practices in order to produce a strong regional policy and an effective policy that addresses gender-based violence. The SADC Parliamentary Forum is a platform that facilitates debate around the issue and allows for knowledge and experience sharing amongst different states in order to produce better policies and legislation at the state level that will help bring an end to gender-based violence. Indeed, regional parliamentary bodies such as the SADC-PF ought to also consider and devise strategies to enhance the role of parliamentarians in conflict resolution. More often than not, we see the executive taking the lead in many conflict prevention and resolution efforts, and we have, of course, seen the increasing role of civil society across many regions in this role. However, one of the key questions facing a structure like the SADC Parliamentary Forum is what it can do in conflict prevention and peace-building efforts across the region. For instance, the SADC Parliamentary Forum could consider deploying information sharing and goodwill missions to the countries affected by conflicts and tensions. COVID has exposed a number of fault lines in Southern African societies and exacerbated a number of issues already facing the region. There have been governance issues related to the pandemic and questions surrounding the lockdown. However, COVID-19 has also provided the region with a platform to showcase its commitment to democracy and willingness to hold peaceful election despite the pandemic. What is needed now is for the region to come together and commit itself to greater cooperation in addressing the issue faced by its various member states, thus producing societies and states more robust and better prepared to face the challenges of the region and the continent. Chairperson, allow me to end my presentation by returning to the report by Secretary General Ahmed Salim, where he lamented the fact that, I quote, the most powerful and wealthiest countries of the world, such as Western Europe, North America, and East Asia, are successfully laying the foundation of collective activity, enhanced unity, increased strength, and greater prosperity. Africa, the weakest and poorest region of the world, does not appear to be making equally discernible and substantial progress in that direction. And I end the quote. It is my firm belief that such occasions, the work of this forum, and the many other various efforts underway across the continent are the political locomotives to strengthen our collective wills to make substantial progress towards the unity of purpose regionally and continentally. Thank you for your attention.
Muito obrigada, senhor embaixador Said, por esta brilhante apresentação. Agora convido o Dr. Adam a fazer a sua apresentação.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Chairperson, Ms. Honorable Augusto, Deputy Chairman, Mr. Berger, Honorable Berger, Secretary General, Sehoma, and Justice Dingake. Nice to see you today once again. And Director of the organ, George Cardoso, and Ambassador Said Demeti, Special Advisor to Accord. Ladies and gentlemen and colleagues, total all protocols observed. My topic is to briefly talk to the specific role that Parliament could play in conflict prevention and conflict management. Let me briefly give some conceptual understanding what we mean with conflict prevention and conflict management. Conflict prevention is often referred to a variety of activity and strategies within the broader peace-building fields that are deployed to preempt and subsequently neutralize potential trigger to widespread violent conflict. It can take two dimensions. One is the direct or operational intervention or prevention, that is reactive and often short-term interventions taken to prevent an imminent outbreak of violence, such as by using or deploying a mediator. The second one is structural prevention. This being a long-term institutional or structural change designed to help create sustainable peace whilst addressing the underlying causes of violence within a society or a community. When we talk about conflict management, we refer always to the practice of being able to identify and handle conflict sensibly, fairly, and effectively. There are a number of approaches that people, or even in our daily life, employ. Some of us really go out and to compete and try to come out with a unilateral solution of the conflict situation. Some of us, or some of the time, people avoid the conflict, run away, leave the issues to die a natural death. Or some of us intend to collaborate and find solutions jointly. And some of us accommodate the opposing interest into ours. In those in the middle, as far as Parliament is concerned, the compromising role that it plays is critical. So when we talk about Parliament's role in conflict prevention and conflict management, it emanates from its two complementary mandates. Namely, I think Justice Dinkake has elaborated on that quite eloquently. One is the representative role or mandate of the Parliament. And this Parliament is considered, as far as conflict prevention and conflict management is concerned, as a platform where interests, values, views are articulated and exchanged, leading to a compromise. The other mandate is legislative. And these compromises reached are formulated as laws, policies that are used by different societal actors as a reference to guide their behavior and coordinate their behavior and actions accordingly. The third one is the oversight. The oversight role, I think the check and the balance role of the Parliament, societal actors, especially the one actor which acts on behalf of the state, that is the executive, has to be brought to an account on what, why, and how it acted on behalf of the public. That is what we call the rule of law. Of course, in general, in our society, especially if we consider in a democratic dispensation, between the legislative, the executive, as well as the judiciary has a major role in conflict resolution. But here now, we are talking about the role of Parliament in conflict resolution, in conflict prevention and conflict management. So given its institutional standing, Parliament has also the potential to play key roles in, number one, as far as conflict prevention is concerned, is early warning through constituency structures and interaction with community members, commissioning a study, investigation, and also inquiry, but also conducting parliamentary hearings to gather information for it to help it to act timelessly for conflict prevention. The second one is more early response through self-action. Self-action, a committee could be dispatched to conflict area to mediate or facilitate dialogue, or commissioning an independent body to mediate or facilitate dialogue. And indeed, given its mandate, Parliament has power to commission bodies to mediate on its behalf. And then compelling the executive to act. Given its oversight role, it has the power also to push executive to act in one way or the other in order to mitigate or manage conflict wherever they occur. In conclusion, peace, security, and good governance are considered as a foundation in the RISDIP 2020 to 2030. The director of the organ, Cardoso, talked about infrastructure for peace. So if we consider parliaments as critical infrastructures of peace, their potential to play a role in conflict prevention and management is indeed given in their nature and the mandate. However, there should be a constant awareness and balancing act between the role of parliament as a key actor in peace building and parliamentarians representing certain interests and conflicting parties, and a balancing act between the short-term electoral interests and the longer-term peace building endeavor. Thank you very much. I rest my case here.
Honorable Chair.
Muito obrigada. Quero agradecer aos três palestrantes pelas três apresentações muito frutuosas, muito pormenorizadas e informativas. Queremos agora abrir o debate. Caros colegas, o debate está aberto para as três apresentações que foram apresentadas. Por favor. Sim, caro colega Doyle, Zimbábue. Tem a palavra.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I would like to thank very much the three presenters for very informative presentations. I would like to firstly commend ourselves as a region for the relative peace that we find ourselves in. What this implies is a lot is being done on conflict prevention. Whilst we are doing a lot on conflict prevention as a region, Madam Chair, the speed at which the organ moves when peace is breached leaves a lot to be desired. I want to pick an example, Madam Chair, the Mozambican terrorist menace. It raised its head some 3 or 4 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, but the region's pace at resolving that conflict was very slow and led to the conflict almost escalating to proportions that were unimaginable. So the speed at which they move to resolve conflict when conflict breaks out should be, we would encourage, if it's the organ, to move faster. Maybe, I don't know, when the region has its own parliament and we set out laws that would govern the region vis-a-vis conflict prevention and conflict resolution, that would be the speed which we resolve these problems would. Madam Chair, that the region is adopted. It's a very commendable one.
Yes, the honorable member is breaking badly.
Conclusion that that is taken of an injury to one is an injury to all. It's very commendable. It would very well help the regime move faster when I think.
Continuamos ainda com problemas?
Yes, Chair, the second part of his questions, it was a bit difficult to hear because of connectivity. But the first part, I'm sure the resource persons were able to hear. Maybe when the member comes back, the chair may request him to retake the second part of his question and comments.
Tá certo, tá certo. Ok. Enquanto aguardamos a conexão, posso convidar agora o deputado Checher, enquanto aguardamos.
Yes, Chair, there is Seychelles. They are asking to take the floor. Maybe they can take the floor now while we wait for a signal from Zimbabwe.
Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Do you hear me? Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Do you hear me?
Yes, we
good
can
afternoon,
hear you.
Madam Chair. Good afternoon, sir. First of all, like you say, I'm Honorable Richard Labous from the Republic of Seychelles. The representation was very, very useful for me, especially as a young man, first novice in politics. So during that representation, I learned more about it. But I have a question, maybe for any one of the presenters. It's regarding conflict in Africa. So actually, the way we see things, the way we see things going on, it's not really clear when that word will be vanished in the African language, because conflict in Africa has been there for years. I think every year from now on, maybe after every 2 years, we see a country who are taking over by a coup. We just saw the last one, I think. But my question is, how as a small, maybe I can use my context as a young man, as a youth. So like you people there who are many vast with experience. So how we can join together as youth and the seniors to come forward, maybe to see a peaceful Africa, and in the same way, we can vanish that word conflict, because it's making a lot of people miserable. a lot of refugee camps around the globe, and maybe someone there can guide me about this one. Thank you.
Chair, kindly unmute. Sure.
Hello? Hello?
Yes, Chair. We have received the question from Seychelles. Maybe we can allow our resource persons to respond.
Tudo bem. Não sei qual é a metodologia que vamos usar, se levantássemos todos, depois dessemos a oportunidade aos oradores para poderem responder às questões.
Yes, I see Director Cardoso is raising his hand, requesting the floor. Maybe we allow him first. Chair, the mic is muted, Chair.
Muito obrigado, tenha bondade.
Muito obrigado, Senhora Presidente. Deixe-me apresentar, em primeiro lugar, as minhas desculpas, porque eu não vou poder continuar por mais muito tempo nesta importante sessão. Tenho um outro compromisso à espera, que na verdade já começou, portanto, aceitem as minhas desculpas por esse facto. Gostaria, todavia, antes de me despedir, poder responder à questão que foi colocada pelo nosso eminente deputado do Zimbábue, se me for permitido. Madam Chairperson, I would like to respond, or to provide clarity rather, on the issue raised by the Honorable Member of Parliament from Zimbabwe, in terms of the timely or the timeously intervention of the organ structures when the region is facing either intrastate or interstate conflicts. Allow me, Madam Chairperson, to refer you to the protocol of the Organ on Politics, Defense and Security Cooperation. It's Article 11. Article 11 of the protocol, it's a very cardinal provision which enables the region to apply its peace and security architecture in order to assist member states in issues of conflict prevention, management, and resolution. Under Article 11, specifically in terms of the procedures, Article 11, it states that in respect to both inter and intrastate conflict, the organ shall seek to obtain consent of the disputant parties to its peacemaking efforts. Let me also introduce another provision under the procedures. And here it says that the organ shall respond to a request by a state party to mediate in a conflict within the territory of the state, and the organ shall endeavor by diplomatic means to obtain such a request. Let me repeat, by diplomatic means to obtain such requests. So, Madam Chairperson, I think it's important to underscore that we don't impose ourselves in our member states. We don't impose our structures or our initiatives in our member states. It is a voluntary request when that request, when that solicitation is made to the region through, in particular, the organ troika, it's then when we can assist a specific member state. So I wish to indicate that our organization is made of sovereign governments. The principle of sovereignty, it's also very cardinal, and we must respect and abide by the principle of sovereignty of our member states, which is a principle espoused in the treaty as well. So in a nutshell, and if you allow me to put it more simply, Madam Chairperson, we are always available to support any member states facing a potential crisis or potential conflict. We are always available. But that provision of the request by the member state which is affected, it's also very important. So I wanted just to provide that clarity, Madam Chairperson, in view of the motion presented by the Honorable Member of Parliament from Zimbabwe. And Madam Chairperson, I wish to once again seek your indulgence to allow me to depart from this meeting. And once again, on behalf of the Executive Secretary, to thank you, Madam Chairperson, for this initiative and for inviting us. And rest assured, Madam Chairperson, that as a Secretariat, we'll continue collaborating, we'll continue working, we'll continue partnering with the Parliamentary Forum, and we look forward for the transition of the Parliamentary Forum into a full SADC Parliament, Madam Chairperson, and we'll equally be supportive and continue working with your good selves. Thank you so much once again for the initiative and for the invitation, Madam Chairperson. Thank you so much.
Muito obrigada, senhor Jorge Cardoso, diretor do órgão da SADC de Assuntos Políticos, pela aula de sapiência que tivemos aqui o privilégio de ter. Estamos muito agradecidos. Esperamos vê-lo brevemente numa outra sessão, para sempre deliciarmos destas apresentações. Muito obrigada e bom trabalho. Vamos dar continuidade ao nosso debate. E estou a ver a mão de Satine aí. Não sei se Zimbábue continua aqui por perto para continuar com a sua questão que não foi bem clara. Sim, deputado Luene, antes de Swatini, pode usar a palavra. Sim.
I'm available, Madam Chair. My question was fully answered by the director, Mr. Cardoso, so I'm satisfied. Thank you.
Obrigado, deputado. Convido agora o deputado Richard. Por favor. Swatini, tenha bondade. É Churchill, né? Swatini já falou. Desculpe, Churchill.
Madam Chair, as members and the SG, all protocol observed. Mine is more of a comment in appreciation of the comprehensive and insightful presentation. Examples on Zambia, Namibia, Malawi are noted with interest. The overall presentation on conflict prevention and management will be useful as we execute our oversight, legislative, and representation, where we are expected to mediate, facilitate dialogue, compel the executive to act. We really appreciate, Madam Chair.
Muito obrigada. Muito obrigada. Algum colega?
Madam Chair, maybe we may allow the other resource persons to respond to the different questions that have been posed and even react to the comments that have been put.
Há problemas de tradução aqui, tá? Sim, por isso estava a procurar saber se ainda haverá outro colega para depois convidar os nossos palestrantes. Não havendo, convido agora os nossos palestrantes para poderem responder aqui algumas questões levantadas pelos colegas. Sim. Senhor Embaixador Said, por favor.
Thank you, Chairperson. I would like to say a few words in response to the question asked by the Honorable Member of Parliament from Seychelles. He asked a big question of what needs to be done to vanish the word, for the word conflict to be vanished. And how can we do to join hands between the youth and seniors to end conflicts in Africa? I must tell him and tell you all that ending conflict is the main objective of our regional organizations like SADC and especially of the African Union. When the African Union was established in 2002, launched in Durban in 2002, it was essentially to create a prosperous and peaceful Africa. That was the objective of the African Union. If we fail to achieve that, that means our organization is not helping to achieve that. So we have to help our organization to achieve that objective. You remember that the African Union, some 10 years ago, has approved a very important program that is called Silencing the Guns by 2020. The ambition of the African Union was to put an end to all conflicts by 2020. That was not possible. Now it has to postpone the objective to a further decade. But for achieving that, we know we need to work hand in hand. The African Union, to speak about the African Union, because I have worked for the African Union, I was the Commissioner for Peace and Security of the African Union. I was the Assistant Secretary General for Political Affairs of the OAU. So I know very well the African Union, but I worked with SADC, with the ECOWAS and many IGAD and other regional organizations. The important issue is preventing conflict. We have seen that whenever conflict has erupted, it's difficult to stop it. So that's why I suggest personally that we should deploy more efforts to prevent conflicts. But unfortunately, there is the problem. Our colleague Cardoso from SADC has been insisting on sovereignty. Yes, sovereignty is pivotal, is critical. It's important for each of the countries. But at the same time, member states sometimes are hiding themselves behind the issue of sovereignty, not to accept intervention by the SADC or the African Union to come and help diffuse a conflict situation. The problem of intervening at the right time to stop, to prevent conflict, requires the collaboration of member states. But more often than not, some of the member states are hiding behind the sovereignty and to avoid intervention by the SADC or the ECOWAS or the African Union. The problem of intervention requires cooperation. And we need also the civil society, women and youth to mobilize. We should not leave the issue of peace and security only to government. Government are very important and they should play their role. But sometimes government, they have their own logic of governments. That's why they need to be supported by members of parliament, by civil society, by the youth, and by others, and so that all together we can join. And when there is a conflict, like the conflict in Mozambique, we have taken too much time to deal with the conflict. Now I see that Mozambique is taking concrete action with the support of SADC and Rwanda to deal with the terrorist threat in some parts of Mozambique. But I think it requires political will and determination by all our member states to put an end to conflicts, and it requires all the member states to allow their institutions to play a role to either to prevent the conflict or when the conflict has erupted to mediate the conflict when there is a role for mediation. Thank you very much.
Muito obrigado, senhor embaixador Said. Convido agora o doutor Adam para responder.
Thank you very much. I fully agree with what Director Cardoso as well as Ambassador Janit said. But I would like to more emphasize on the 2 points I raised in my presentation. Of course, my presentation was very condensed for the sake of time. But let me highlight the 2 points I mentioned, I raised it in my presentation. This is the awareness and constant balancing act between the role of parliament as a key actor in peace building and parliamentarians representing certain interests and conflicting parties. The second one is the short-term electoral interest and a long-term peace building endeavor. In this, what I would like to emphasize is when external actors, let's say the UN, African Union, or even SADC try to intervene in a conflict, the conflict has gone haywire and must have been untenable for domestic institutions to deal with it. But we need to think a little bit earlier, in a way, in terms of conflict prevention, and what is the role of parliament at that stage, because we know that parliament is composed of conflicting parties or in terms of political parties who are also part and parcel of probably the domestic power struggle or conflict in a particular country. If we look at our region, most of the conflicts are as a result of electoral disputes, and which puts parliamentarians, politicians at the center of the conflict. So what we are expecting is in electoral disputes, the parliamentarians who are juggling for positions to mediate. So this is one critical issue that we have to consider when we talk the role of parliament in conflict prevention or managing conflict. So what is important is probably I would suggest is how do we shield the state institutions like parliament not to be inflicted or not to be a space where sectional party interests are advanced against the long-term interests of a country. This is the issue we need probably to unpack, and as we discuss the role of Parliament in conflict prevention. Secondly, Parliament, in terms of it is representative power. In terms of all parliamentarians representing their constituency, how do they gather information? How do they intensify their interactions with the community on the ground and feed into the whatever platform there may be in the parliament to constructively address whatever disparity there may be without taking sides for the sake of sustainable peace in their own constituency, but also in the country in general. So these are the 2 points I wanted to emphasize. With regard to the question from the Honorable Member of Parliament from Seychelles around the generation, I think this generational cooperation is something that we as an Africans have been lagging behind in a way, and that's why the youth generally feel excluded from decision-making processes. That's why I'm very much delighted to see you, young people like you, represented in decision-making structures. So the cooperation among our elders and the youth is indeed critical, because continuity, but also building up from what has been achieved so far is very critical. And considering that the youth are in majority are the victims, but also perpetrators of conflict or violence in many conflicting areas, is indeed something that is concerning. So their role in addressing African conflict is indeed pivotal, I would say. Thank you very much.
Muito obrigada, doutor Adam. Chegando a este tempo, agradeço a todos os palestrantes pelas brilhantes apresentações que aqui desfilaram. Essas apresentações que vão nos ajudar a lidar com esses desafios, a prevenirmos desses conflitos nos nossos países. Mais uma vez, muito obrigado a todos os nossos palestrantes nesta sessão. Tendo em conta que vamos ao fim dos nossos trabalhos, vamos daqui a nada concluir com a nossa agenda, mas antes gostaria de convidar o vice-presidente, o senhor deputado Berga, a dizer algumas observações finais. Não sei se estará por aqui.
Thank you very much, and I'd like to just thank you, everyone that is here with us still. Obviously, as was stated, that obviously a lot of people did have to attend other activities, but to our guests, I know that your time was precious, and to give us so much of it was important. And we appreciate it. And what was said, you know, the fact that we didn't have so many clarity-seeking questions, we had more discussion, is important. because it says a lot about what we, that we're going forward, and that there's a lot more to be, that there's a lot more clarity. And from our side, I just, for us, I look forward to the days when we can be all in a room, and that we have all the pages in front of us, and that we can actually start signing more of the achievements, and we can get to a situation where we're in each other's countries, and we're able to get to the legislatures of these countries, and we're able to speak to the legislatures of these countries. I know that with the Honorable President and myself, we have been on some of the oversights, and one of the memorable ones was to Zambia, and we spoke to a lot of the stakeholders before the elections. And it's very interesting that, we, before the oversights, it was highly questionable as to the type of election that one was going to be witness to. And yet afterwards, our report was one that we said that we have no doubt that Zambia would be a free and fair election, or that we believed that Zambia was ready for a free and fair election. And we saw that, that SADC was having a series of elections that are showing us that now is the time for a role model law, and now is the time for countries to respect role model law. And as the judge said, that it doesn't mean that countries are throwing away their own liberty, and it does not mean that countries are throwing away their own interpretation, and that countries are now don't need constitutions and they don't need legislatures, because now there's a super body that is going to do everything for countries. All it means is that there's an act, or there's a model law that one can aspire to, but that a country still has its independence, and a country still has their legislation, their way of doing things, and their constitution. And that at this stage, they are in charge of what they're doing, and that they are running their show, and that a model law is there as something that one aspires to, or that someone takes out what is good, or takes out what could be better than what they have at this point in time. And it's always a pleasure to have people in discussions that challenge your way of thinking, or make you think a little bit more out of the box. And I just want to say that today that was beneficial to us. We had a good turnout, and for us, again, the staff that put together the agenda, that put together the speakers, and gave us a good guest list. I just want to say thank you very much to everyone. And with that, I would like to say that from my side, I thank everyone, and thank you for your participation. Thank you.
Muito obrigada, senhor vice-presidente, por essas notas finais. Chegando a esta altura, reitero os meus agradecimentos a todos pela vossa participação. Nada mais havendo a tratar, os trabalhos desta reunião ficam encerrados até a próxima reunião. Muito obrigada. Até a próxima reunião.
Thank you very much. ICT, may we terminate?
that the youth are in majority are the victims, but also perpetrators of conflict or violence in many conflicting areas is indeed something that is concerning. Their role in addressing African conflict is indeed pivotal, I would say. Thank you very much.
Situation where we're in each other's countries and we're able to.
Pela vossa participação. Nada mais havendo a tratar, os trabalhos desta reunião ficam.
Thank you very much. ICT, may we terminate?
Pela vossa participação. Nada mais havendo a tratar, os trabalhos desta reunião ficam encerrados até a próxima reunião. Muito obrigada. Até a próxima reunião.